The phone lit up at 12:53 in the morning, and the number on the screen was one nobody was supposed to have. Roman Delacroix kept two phones, one for the men who worked the docks, one for no one. The second one almost never rang, and when it buzzed against the marble of his desk that night, he assumed it was a mistake before he even looked. There is a man hurting my mom. He won't stop. I don't know who else to call. He read it twice. His first instinct was the one he'd trained in himself over 20 years. A trick. A test. Somebody fishing to see if the line was live. He set the phone down and turned back to the ledgers in front of him. Then it buzzed again. "I'm in the closet. He said if I come out, he'll kill her. Please." Something in the second message went through him like cold water down the spine. It was the spelling. The way a 9-year-old spells when her hands are shaking. He had seen a lot of fear in his life. He had built a great deal of it himself, but he had never once seen fear that looked like a child spelling carefully in the dark because it was the only thing she still had control over. He typed 4 words. "Where are you? I'm coming." His men were still talking on the far side of the room when he stood up, took his coat off the back of the chair, and walked out. August, his second, called after him. Roman didn't answer. He didn't have an answer that would make sense to anyone who hadn't felt what he just felt. The rain had started. Warm, New Orleans rain that never cooled anything down. As his car pulled out onto the wet street, a third message came in. "I hear him on the stairs." His hands tightened on the wheel. The wipers dragged across the glass. Somewhere across the city, a little girl was counting footsteps in the dark, and the only person who knew was a man whose name was used to frighten grown criminals into silence. Tonight, he wasn't going to arrive as any of that. Tonight, he was the only thing standing between that child and whatever was already inside her house. And what he found when he got there would tear open a door he had spent his whole adult life keeping shut. Stay with me all the way to the end of this one, because what happened in that house changed 2 lives that were already broken and one that everybody thought couldn't be. If stories like this move you, take a second right now to like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now let's go back to the beginning. For 22 years, Roman Delacroix had run the riverside of New Orleans the way a surgeon runs a table. Quietly, precisely, without wasting emotion. His name moved cargo, settled disputes, and ended arguments that police reports never mentioned. Men who had never met him lowered their voices when they said it. He had one rule, and he'd carved his whole life out of it. Need nothing. Owe nothing. Feel nothing. But sitting in the back of that car, cutting through flooded streets toward an address he had never seen, Roman felt something he had gone years without. He didn't have a clean word for it. The closest one was dread, and dread was a stranger to him. The map on the dash said 14 minutes. He did the math without wanting to. 14 minutes was a long time for a child who was already whispering to a stranger because she'd run out of people. The phone buzzed on the seat beside him. "I can't hear my mom anymore." He pressed the accelerator. The engine climbed and the streetlights smeared past the wet windows like something melting. He had driven these streets 10,000 times. He had never driven them like this. Roman Delacroix was not supposed to care about a child texting a wrong number. He was not supposed to care about anything that couldn't be counted or controlled. But racing toward a house he had no business going to, he found himself back somewhere he had spent a fortune trying never to go. 26 years earlier, he had been someone else entirely. Back then, his name was Elias Boudreau, and he was 14 years old, sharing a 2-room apartment off Elysian Fields with his mother and his little brother Theo. They didn't have much. Theo didn't seem to know it. He was 7, all elbows and questions, obsessed with the sky. He kept a paper chart of the moon taped over his bed, and he'd wake Elias up on clear nights to point out which phase it was, as if it were news. Elias walked him to school. Elias made the grilled cheese when their mother worked doubles. When Theo was scared, it was Elias he came to. because Elias always knew what to do. The problem moved in that winter. Their mother's boyfriend, a big man named Cyrus, who smiled a lot until the door closed. He was fine when he was sober. He was a different animal when he wasn't, and by spring he wasn't, most nights. Elias learned the sounds, the chair going over, his mother's voice going high and then going careful. He learned to take Theo into the back room and turn the little radio up and tell him stories about nights. The same handful over and over until the noise on the other side of the wall stopped. One night in April, the noise didn't stop when it was supposed to. Elias was 14 and skinny, and he went out there anyway because his little brother was standing in the hallway and he couldn't get him back into the room in time. He remembers reaching for Theo. He remembers being thrown. He remembers the corner of the table and the terrible sound it made. And then he doesn't remember much in order for a while. Theo lived 4 days in a hospital across town under lights that hummed. He drifted in and out. In one of the clear moments, he looked up at his brother, and he wasn't scared, which was the worst part. He asked if it was a full moon yet. Elias said almost. Theo said he wanted to see it. He didn't. After the funeral, something in Elias Boudreau simply switched off. The part that believed the world protected small things. He had learned at 14 that the people who were supposed to keep you safe couldn't, and the law that was supposed to come never came in time. So he stopped waiting for anyone to be the thing that stood in the doorway. He decided he would be it. He started small, carrying messages for men who paid in cash. He learned who really ran the city, the ones whose names weren't on any building. Within 6 years, he was collecting instead of carrying. Within 10, he owned the corners. Within 15, he owned the river. And somewhere in all of it, Elias Boudreau disappeared for good and Roman Delacroix took his place. A man with walls thick enough that nothing living had gotten through them in a very long time. Until 12:53 that morning, when a stranger's daughter spelled please in the dark. The map said 5 minutes. Another message came, and this one was weaker than the others. I'm really tired. I think I'll close my eyes for a minute. That one hit him somewhere the others hadn't. He knew that tone. He had heard it once before, in a hospital bed under humming lights, from a boy who wanted to see the moon. It was the sound of a small body deciding it was done being afraid. No, he said out loud to the empty car. Not tonight. He steered with one hand and typed with the other. Stay awake and talk to me. What's your name? The reply came slow. Nora. Nora, I'm almost to you. I need you awake. Can you do that for me? I'll try. Good. Tell me about your mom. What's she like? Her name is Maya. She makes cinnamon toast and she hums when she braids my hair. She knows all the constellations. My dad taught her before he died, and now she teaches me. Roman felt the first hairline crack open in a wall he'd spent 26 years building. This child, folded into a closet in the dark, was talking about cinnamon toast and constellations. She was describing the exact ordinary evening that Theo never got to grow old enough to have. The map said 1 minute. He could see the house now. A narrow 2-story off a flooded side street in Gentilly. One porch bulb burned out, the yard gone to weeds. Most of the windows were black. In one, a shape moved behind a curtain. He killed the headlights and rolled to a stop across the street. No police. No ambulance. No neighbor at a window. Whatever was happening in that house was happening. The way it always did. With no one watching. His phone buzzed one last time. He found me. Roman was out of the car before he'd finished reading it. The air outside was thick and wet and smelled of the river and cut grass and, underneath that, when he reached the porch, something else. Something warm and metallic that his body recognized before his mind named it. The front door hung open a few inches. Inside, he could hear a man moving, heavy and unhurried. The confident weight of someone who has never once been stopped. A slurred voice rolled down the hall. You can't hide all night. I got all the time in the world. Roman went through the door without a sound. The front room had been torn apart, a lamp on its side still burning, throwing long shadows up the wall. Picture frames off the shelf, glass across the floor, a child's drawing scattered like leaves. And, in the middle of it, a woman. Maya was on the floor beside the overturned couch, not moving, dark hair matted at the temple, one arm folded under her at a wrong angle. Roman crossed to her and put 2 fingers to her throat with a gentleness that would have surprised every man who'd ever feared him. A pulse, slow, but there. She was breathing, beaten badly, but alive, and she would stay that way if help came soon. Down the hall, a door banged open. Then another. The man was going room to room. Come on out, little rat. Make it easy. Roman rose. Every muscle in his body settled into a stillness that had ended a lot of arguments. This wasn't work. This wasn't territory or money or respect. This was the one thing in the world that could still reach the boy inside the man, and it had reached all the way down. He walked into the hall, and the man came out of the back bedroom, and they saw each other at the same time. He was a big one, 6 foot something, thick through the shoulders, a bar bouncer's build gone soft. His knuckles were split. There was blood on his shirt that wasn't his. His name, though Roman didn't know it yet, was Boyd Kessler, and everything about the way he'd been hunting a child through her own house told Roman exactly what kind of animal he was looking at. Boyd blinked at the stranger standing in the wreckage of the living room. Confusion first. This wasn't a cop. This wasn't a neighbor who'd fold the second you raised your voice. Who the hell are you? Boyd said, swaying a little. This ain't your house and it ain't your problem. Walk back out that door. Roman said nothing. He studied the man the way he'd once studied rivals across a table before he took everything they had. He noted the drink slowing the feet, the weight sitting too high, the distance between them. He wasn't angry. Anger was loud, and loud was slow. He was doing arithmetic. I said, get out. Boyd came forward with his fists up, the way men do when they've only ever hit people who couldn't hit back. Roman moved once. 1 second Boyd was lumbering in, and the next he was flat on the floor with the back of his skull ringing off the boards and a hand at his throat that closed with the calm certainty of a vice. There was nothing wild in it. It was clean, and it was practiced, and it was somehow more frightening for how little effort it cost. Listen to me carefully, Roman said, quiet enough that Boyd had to hold still to hear it. I'm going to ask you one thing. Your night depends on the answer. Where is the girl? Boyd's eyes bulged. He clawed at the wrist and got nowhere. Roman eased off 1/2 inch, enough for a word. I don't know what you're... The hand closed again. The edges of Boyd's vision started to go. Nora, Roman said. 9 years old. Hiding somewhere in this house while you knocked her mother out cold and went looking for her. That girl. Where? The name landed. Something in Boyd's face shifted from confusion to the specific fear of a man who has just realized he's been caught. Upstairs, he wheezed. Attic, maybe. Look, man, this is between me and Maya. We had a fight. The kid's not even mine anyway. I was just trying to teach her some manners. Before Roman could answer, a small voice drifted down from the top of the stairs. Thin, cracked, but alive. Is somebody there? Nora. She had heard a voice that wasn't Boyd's, and against everything the night had taught her, she was hoping. The crack in Roman's wall widened into something he couldn't close. I'm here, he called up, keeping his voice even. You're safe now. Stay right where you are for 1 more minute. I'm coming to get you. Under his hand, Boyd tried to twist free and got nowhere. You don't get it, he panted. That brat's been a headache since her old man drowned. Maya can't handle her. Somebody had to put a hand on it. There was footfall on the stairs above. Light. Uncertain. Getting closer. Roman made a decision that Boyd Kessler would be turning over in his mind for the rest of a life that had just gotten a great deal more careful. He hauled the man up by the collar and walked him back toward the kitchen, out of the line of sight of the stairs. Whatever came next was not going to happen where a child could watch it. "Nora," he called over his shoulder, gentling his voice back down. "Go sit with your mom for me. I'm calling a doctor. It's going to be all right now." If this is the kind of story you sit all the way through, do me a favor and hit subscribe so the next one finds you. Drop a comment too. I read them. Now back to that kitchen. The kitchen light was a bare fluorescent tube that ticked and flickered overhead. Roman put Boyd against the counter and held him there with almost no pressure at all, which was its own kind of message. "You've got 30 seconds, Roman said. "I'd spend them well. They might be the most useful 30 seconds of your life." Boyd talked. The alcohol that had made him brave an hour ago made him sloppy now, and it all came out. He'd been with Maya 4 months, moved in after 2, started with the yelling, then the grabbing, then the nights the neighbors learned to turn their televisions up. Tonight Maya had told him to leave, and he hadn't liked the word. She'd gotten between him and Nora, and he'd put her down, and then the girl had said she was calling for help, and he couldn't have that. "Why not?" Roman said. It wasn't really a question. Boyd's jaw worked. "I got a thing in Jefferson Parish. Skipped out on a court date. There's a battery charge with my name on it. Cops come here. I don't sleep in my own bed again for a long time." "So you chased a 9-year-old through her house," Roman said, "to keep yourself out of a cell you already earned." When you say it like that, it sounds bad. It sounds exactly like what it is. From the front room came the small, brave sound of Nora talking to her unconscious mother, telling her the man who came was going to fix it, telling her to wake up so they could go get beignets in the morning like she promised. That sound did something to Roman that no threat ever had. It reached past the 26 years, and the walls, and the name, all the way back to a hallway off Elysian Fields and a boy who wanted to see the moon. He leaned close to Boyd, and when he spoke, his voice had gone very quiet. "I've met every kind of man there is in my line of work. Men who move poison, men who lend money and take fingers, men who'll end a life for a number on a page. You want to know the only ones I've never had the stomach for?" Boyd shook his head, too scared now to speak. "The ones who save it all up for someone half their size." He let that sit. Then he stepped back and let go, and Boyd sagged against the counter, gulping air. "Here's how tonight ends," Roman said. "You walk out that back door and you are gone from this city before the sun comes up. You never call Maya. You never come within a mile of Nora. New parish, new name if you're smart. You get to keep breathing, which is more than you were about to give either of them." Hope flickered in Boyd's eyes. It didn't last. "But understand this part," Roman went on, softer still. "If I ever hear your name again next to a woman or a child, if you so much as raise your hand in a bar, I will hear about it. I hear about everything on this side of the river and a good deal on the other, and the next conversation we have won't have a back door in it. Are we clear?" Boyd nodded so hard it looked like it hurt. "Then go." Boyd stumbled to the back door, hands shaking too badly to work the latch on the first try. When he got it open and the wet night air came in, Roman spoke once more without turning around. "You've got until sunrise. After that, I stop being generous." The door banged shut, and he was gone into the dark, and Roman stood alone in the ticking light with the weight of a choice he'd made. He had let the man live, not out of mercy. Killing him would have been the old answer, the easy one, the one Roman Delacroix had reached for 100 times. Tonight asked for something the old answer couldn't buy. Tonight asked him to leave a room where a monster still breathed, because there was a child in the next one who needed him more than that monster needed to die. He took out his phone and called a number he knew without looking. Dr. Naomi Halloran picked up on the second ring, awake the way she always somehow was. Roman. What's wrong? A woman with a serious head injury. Possible concussion. Broken arm. She needs care tonight, and she needs it quiet. No report. No questions. Address. He gave it. Halloran had patched him and his men for 12 years, and now and then patched people who needed help and couldn't afford to have police at the door. 20 minutes, she said. Is this business? Roman looked toward the front room, where a 9-year-old was holding her mother's hand and whispering about beignets. No, he said, and the honesty of it surprised him. This one's mine. He went back down the hall and stopped in the doorway because the sight of her stopped him. Nora sat on the floor beside her mother in pajamas covered in painted planets, her red hair tangled, her knees pulled up. She was small in a way that reached into his chest and squeezed. When she looked up at him, her eyes were swollen from crying, but there was something else in them that undid him completely. Not fear, trust. The plain, unearned trust of a child who has decided you are the one who came. Is he gone? She asked. He's gone, Roman said. He isn't coming back. I promise you that. He knelt down so they were level, the way he'd once knelt beside a hospital bed under humming lights. A doctor's on her way for your mom, a very good one. She's going to make sure your mother wakes up and gets better. Nora studied him with the seriousness only children have. You're the one from the phone. Roman. That's me. Why did you come? She asked. You don't know us. The question went through him like the second text had, all those minutes ago that felt like years. How do you tell a 9-year-old that her wrong number reached across 26 years of buried grief and woke up a person he thought he'd killed off on purpose? How do you tell her that coming for her was the only way left to keep a promise he'd made in a cemetery to a boy who never got to be 9? A long time ago, he said, I had a little brother. I couldn't get to him in time. When I lost him, I made myself a promise that if a scared kid ever called out and I could hear it, I'd come. For a lot of years, nobody called. Then you texted a number you got wrong, and I could hear it. Nora took this in. What was his name? Theo. He loved the moon. He'd wake me up to show me which shape it was, like I hadn't seen it 100 times. She was quiet a moment. Then she reached out and put her small hand in his. The exact gesture a boy had made in a hospital bed a lifetime ago, and Roman had to hold still against the doorframe of his own composure. I'm glad you heard me, she said. Outside, headlights swung across the front windows. Dr. Halloran had arrived, bag in hand and discretion intact. Soon Maya would have the care she needed, and Nora would have her mother back. But Roman already understood that his part in this was not ending tonight. It was starting. For the first time in longer than he could count, he had found something worth standing in a doorway for. 6 months later, Nora Cole stood at the window of a bedroom that was actually hers, in a small, clean house on a street where the porch lights all worked and the neighbors knew each other's names. Her mother had healed, the arm had mended. The bruises were long gone, and Maya had started humming again while she braided Nora's hair, which Nora had missed more than she knew how to say. The bigger change was harder to point at. It lived in the man who showed up most Sundays with a paper sack of beignets and powdered sugar already on his coat. Not the man half the city was afraid to name. Just Roman, who was teaching Nora to read the night sky the way her father once had, who had bought a second-hand telescope and set it up in the backyard so she could find the craters herself. He never made a show of any of it. There was quietly a fund now, enough to carry Nora through school and past it, arranged through so many hands that no one could trace it back to him. There was a lease in Maya's name on a house that a landlord had somehow decided to price like a favor. There were people, unseen, who made sure Boyd Kessler had kept driving that night and never once thought about turning around. Boyd had vanished the way Roman said he would. Word travels in the places words like that matter, and the word was simple. In Roman Delacroix's city, you do not put your hands on children. But the deepest change wasn't in the streets or the house on the good block. It was in Roman. He had believed for most of his life that the hardest heart was the safest one, and that caring about anything soft only handed the world another way to hurt you. A little girl who dialed a stranger by accident had proven the whole thing wrong. Her message went to the wrong number. It reached the only person on Earth who had spent his whole life waiting, without knowing it, for exactly that call. Some mistakes, it turns out, land in the one pair of hands that were always meant to catch them. On a clear night that fall, Nora knocked on the glass and called him out to the yard because the moon was full and she wanted him to see it. Roman went and stood beside her in the dark and looked up. And for the length of one breath, he wasn't a man anyone feared. And he wasn't the boy who came too late. He was just someone a kid had wanted to show the sky. He thought his brother would have liked her. He thought Theo would have liked her very much. If this story reached you, you already know why. Somewhere out there, someone is counting footsteps in the dark right now, hoping the right person hears. Tell me in the comments. Would you have gotten in the car? And where in the world are you watching from? If stories about broken people finding their way back to who they were meant to be are the kind you stay for, subscribe, and I'll have the next one waiting for you. Inside was a letter, and it read, in part, "To whoever opens this, most likely Vice Admiral Frances Doyle, if she still holds the post. If you are reading this, I am gone, and I've got nothing to leave the world. No family, no money, nothing it would notice losing. But there is a young woman named Imani Rowe. For 7 months she brought me breakfast every morning, not because anyone was watching, not because I could give her a thing back. She did it because she saw me when the whole country had lost my file. This nation used up everything I had and then misplaced me in a drawer. This girl, who has less than nothing, gave me back my dignity. See her the way she saw me. R. Halloway, USN. I read it 3 times. Every time it got heavier. The stories hadn't been stories. The 40 fathoms, the men he carried home, the boats that weren't on any list. He'd been telling me the truth from the very first orange, and I'd been the one too tired to believe him. I mailed the packet to the address in raised block letters, Vice Admiral F. Doyle, at an office of naval accountability I'd never heard of. I stood in line 20 minutes to send it, and when I got to the counter, I almost took it back, almost decided nobody would read a dead homeless man's letter, that it would get filed into a drawer just like he had. But I'd made a promise, so I slid it across the counter and watched it drop into a bin with 100 other envelopes and disappear. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing, and I told myself that was that. Then, on a gray morning in May, someone knocked on my door at 5:52 a.m. 3 of them, a captain in dress blues and 2 officers behind him. Imani Rowe, we're here about Raymond Halloway. Vice Admiral Doyle received his letter. The captain paused. And she would like to meet you. They flew me to Washington. I had never been on a plane. There was a car at the airport and a hotel room cleaner than anywhere I'd ever slept, and the next morning they walked me through a building so big it had its own weather and into a small office where a woman with silver hair and 3 stars on her shoulder stood up when I came in. Miss Rowe. Vice Admiral Frances Doyle shook my hand, firm, not crushing. On her desk was a file with Ray's name on the tab. Ray Halloway was one of the finest recovery divers this Navy ever trained. He went where we sent our worst days. He brought home men who had no other way home. She tapped the folder. One of the crews he pulled out of the water in 1994 included a young officer who is now the chief of naval operations. Ray saved his life. And then this country lost Ray in a paperwork error and never went looking. His service was classified, so when his file glitched, there was no ordinary trail to follow him by. By the time we realized he was gone, he'd already vanished into the street. He told me all of it, I said quietly. I thought he was confused. He wasn't. Doyle's jaw tightened. We failed him, and he spent the last words he had on this earth making sure we wouldn't fail you." She looked at me a long moment. "I'm running a review of how the VA loses veterans with sealed records. Ray's is the worst case I've found. It is not the only one. There are dozens." She leaned forward. "I want to establish a fund in his name. I want to fix the tracking system, and I want you to testify before the House Committee on Veterans Affairs about what happened." The room tilted the way it had in my hallway. "I'm nobody," I said. "Why would anybody listen to me?" "Rank only ever told you who gives the orders," Doyle said. "It never once told you who earned the salute." She let that sit. "They'll listen because you're the one person in this whole story who did the right thing for no reason at all. Will you do it?" I thought about the coin in my bag and the 3 words on the back of that photograph. "See her." "Yes," I said. They gave me 3 weeks and a team of people, lawyers and advisors, who set me up in a small office and walked me through what a hearing was. And somewhere in there, they started shaving down my story. "We should probably keep the eviction and the payday loans out of it," a young legislative aide named Preston said in a jacket that cost more than my rent. "Focus on service and sacrifice. Keep it clean." My life wasn't clean, I said. "That's the whole point. It can read as political, that's all." Vice Admiral Doyle had been quiet in the corner. She set down her coffee. "If we sand off who she is," she said, "we bury why Ray's coin ever mattered." He didn't leave that letter for a woman who had it easy. He left it for a girl who fed him out of an empty cup. She testifies whole, or she doesn't testify. Preston closed his mouth. "Yes, ma'am." The night before, Rosa called me from the warehouse floor. "You scared?" "Terrified." "Good. Means it matters. Just tell them what happened. They can't fight the truth, mija. They can only stand there while it happens to them." The hearing room was bigger than any room I'd been in. Tiered seats rising up like a courtroom, cameras in the back, a full press bench, members filing in and talking over each other and not looking at me once. I sat at the witness table and pressed my shaking hands flat against the wood. Vice Admiral Doyle testified first, laid out Ray's record, the sealed service, the crews he'd recovered, the man he'd saved who now ran the Navy, the paperwork error that erased him. When a member asked how many cases like his existed, she said, "We've identified 61 so far. We believe there are more." A low murmur moved through the room. Then it was me. I'd written out testimony. When I sat down, I pushed it aside. I told them about the orange, about the biscuit torn in half every morning, about the stories I didn't believe, about the doorway getting pressure washed with him still in it. I told them I hadn't known he was a veteran, that it hadn't mattered whether the stories were true, that he was a person, either way. One member, a Representative Boone, leaned into his mic. "Miss Rowe, that's all very moving, but the VA budget is stretched thin. Are you suggesting the taxpayer fund care for every homeless man in America?" The room went still. I felt the fear turn over inside me and come out the other side as something cold and clear. "I'm not talking about every homeless man," I said. "I'm talking about Raymond Holloway, a man who went down 40 fathoms to carry other people's sons home so their mothers would have a grave to kneel beside. This country made him a promise when it sent him down there." I leaned toward the microphone. He kept his end. I gave him a hot biscuit. You gave him a lost file. So don't ask me which one of us kept faith. Nobody spoke. Somewhere behind me, pens were moving fast. A Representative Halstead cleared her throat. "Miss Rowe, do you believe this can be fixed?" "It has to be," I said. "Because if we only decide a man is worth something after we find out he saved an admiral, then we've already lost the thing that made him worth saving. Ray had dignity in a doorway with nothing. He had it the whole time. The least we owe the next one is to see him before the medals turn up." My voice cracked, just once. He deserved better. They all deserve better. Vice Admiral Doyle stood. Mr. Chairman, effective today, the office is standing up a task force for veterans with sealed records and allocating $6.5 million to the Raymond Holloway Recovery Fund. She looked at me. And I'm appointing Miss Rowe as its outreach director. She already knows what it looks like to find the ones the system dropped. In the hallway afterward, reporters swarmed. One shouted, "How does it feel to be famous?" I stopped and turned around. "I don't want to be famous," I said. "I want Ray to be remembered." That one sentence played on every channel that night. A year later, and everything had changed and nothing had. I still lived in Chattanooga, though I'd finally moved to a place with heat that worked. I'd earned my paramedic license. I ran the Raymond Holloway Recovery Fund, which had grown past anything we imagined. $6.5 million from the Navy, and another $3.2 million in donations after my testimony went out into the world. We'd found grants for shelters and legal clinics and outreach teams whose whole job was walking the streets before dawn, looking for the people the paperwork lost. In its first year, the fund reached more than 2,400 veterans. And that spring, a bill they called the Holloway Act passed, requiring the VA to build real tracking for service members with sealed records, so the next Ray couldn't just quietly disappear. Some afternoons, I'd find a young vet sitting alone in a waiting room, shoulders up around their ears, trying to hold on to dignity while the system ground them down. I'd bring 2 cups of coffee and sit beside them. There was a woman named Raina, a former Air Force loadmaster, staring at the floor in an oversized field jacket, and I sat down and asked, "You take it with sugar or strong enough to argue with?" She almost laughed. Then she cried. Then we got her benefits started that same afternoon, using the map Ray had left me in a soft yellow notebook. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. I thought about a cold doorway and an orange I almost didn't hand over. "Because somebody taught me," I said, "that small things aren't small." One Tuesday, I drove out to Chattanooga National Cemetery. Ray was buried there now with full honors, a flag folded and given, an honor guard for a man they'd once hosed off a step. His stone read Raymond A. Holloway, United States Navy. I knelt and set 3 things on the granite: a whole orange, the dented steel flask, still faintly warm, and his challenge coin, the brass and blue one, pressed flat against the stone. I kept my promise, I told him. All of them. The wind moved through the trees, and I stayed a long while. If you've ever done a quiet kindness that you were sure went unnoticed, or if you've ever been the person the world stepped over, tell me about it in the comments. I read every one, and I promise you, someone reading this needs to hear it. And if stories like Ray's move you, subscribe and stay with me, because I've got more of them. And every one is about somebody who was never actually disposable, no matter what the paperwork said. Because that's the whole thing, isn't it? Nobody is disposable just because a file got lost. The people the world hurries past are usually the ones worth kneeling down for. Ray taught me that with half a biscuit and a coin he had no reason to keep. The least I can do is teach it back. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next one.